YouTube. If you've been watching my videos, then you know I shoot a lot with Nikon D750 DSLR cameras with a bunch of different lenses from Tamron, Rokinon, and Nikon. And they're great cameras, great lenses. I've been using them for a lot of years, but you know, they are starting to show their age. So recently I added something new to my kit, a Nikon Z8 mirrorless camera with Nikon's Z-mount 70 to 200mm lens. Now, this is a fairly significant jump in technology, and some of you may be considering a similar move. So today I'm going to give you my first impressions of working with the Z8. And the first thing to know is that there's completely different technology inside. Now, my D750s are DSLR cameras, and that means there are mirrors inside the camera body that reflect the light coming in through the lens into the viewfinder, so I can see what I'm shooting. And then when I press the shutter button, the mirror flips up and the camera captures the image on the image sensor. The Z8 is a mirrorless camera, which is a relatively new technology. It's completely electronic. Now, with mirrorless cameras, light passes through the lens directly onto the image sensor. There are no mirrors involved. Now, these cameras use electronic viewfinders, so when you're looking through the camera at your subject, you're seeing exactly what the image sensor sees, a purely digital image. And then, when you press the shutter button, the camera just goes ahead and captures the image. Now, even though there's completely different technology inside, both of these cameras are Nikons, and the Z8 did feel very familiar in terms of handling and ergonomics and the Nikon menu system. It all felt fairly intuitive and certainly recognizable as a Nikon camera. And my first take, I'm impressed with the Z8. One of the first things I noticed was the overall level of detail in how you can set up and configure and personalize the camera. And also, there's built-in redundancy in that you can get to various functions in a number of different ways, and I found that very convenient as well. Now, one of the first things I noticed with the Z8 was the viewfinder. I found that really interesting. Now, with the viewfinder, the default setting is that it will see whatever your settings are set for. So if you're, a little underexposed, what you're going to see in the viewfinder is going to be darker. But there are times when you're going to want to be deliberately underexposed. For instance, if you're shooting portraits with off-camera flash, you don't want any ambient light, you just want lights from the flash to illuminate your subject. So for that, you're going to have your camera underexposed. And what you can do with the Z8 is you can set the viewfinder to see in the dark no matter what the conditions are. It's just a simple menu change, or you can even configure a button on the camera to make the change instantly, and suddenly your viewfinder enables you to see in the dark. So that's a pretty cool and convenient function. But probably the biggest change I noticed is with the autofocus system. It's much more complex and detailed in the Z8. Now, with the D750, you could set the camera for continuous autofocus for moving subjects, and you could also select the number of focus points that the camera used to assist in the focusing process. But that's about it. Now with the Z8, you start there, you've got continuous autofocus for moving subjects, but then you have many more options for how the camera selects the focus point within its field of view. How wide a focusing area it is, whether your focus point is larger or smaller, whether you're going to use surrounding focus points to assist, whether you're going to track your subject three-dimensionally. So many more options. And then the camera goes further still. With the Z8, you can use subject detection and have the camera prioritize things like people or birds or animals or vehicles. So that's a bit of artificial intelligence doing some subject detection work for you. But the Z8 goes even further still, and you can set it to prioritize erratically moving subjects, and you can even set the number of seconds that the camera will delay locking on to something that moves in front of what you're focusing on. So let's say you're focusing on an athlete making some move, and then someone suddenly crosses in front of or suddenly crosses between you and that athlete. The camera won't immediately shift focus to the person in the foreground. So that's a really cool and convenient feature. Now, when I was doing my research on the Z8, there were two things that I was not sure about. And the first thing was the memory cards. Now, as you may know, the Z8 uses two different size memory cards, a CF Express card in one slot, an SD card in the second. And I was concerned that, SD cards are typically a little slower. So my question was, would the SD card be able to keep up if I'm shooting multiple frames per second? Now, even though the Z8 can shoot up to 20 frames per second, and I think in some cases even more, the fact is, I found that I don't need to shoot 20 frames per second. I'd end up with thousands of images. It would be overwhelming, I think. And it's just I don't need to capture that many frames, quite honestly. So what I do is I shoot at a relatively slow 8 frames per second. And that's proved to be fine, and the SD card so far has had no trouble keeping up. I've had, no buffering issues or delay or anything like that. So that ended up not being an issue. Now the second concern I had was with battery life. Pretty much everything the Z8 does uses battery power, so it's going to go through a battery a lot faster than the D750. For example, with the D750, I could shoot an entire hockey game or a volleyball game with just one battery. The Z8 definitely needs 2. So, my concern was, am I going to run out of juice? Is it going to be a problem? Is it going to slow me down or interrupt my, workflow? Well, that turned out not to be a problem either, because it's very easy to change a battery. It's just a matter of a couple seconds. And, all I need to do is shoot a few sets of volleyball or a couple periods of hockey, take a look, see the battery's running low, and boom, switch out another one, I'm ready to go again. And you know what? You should always carry a couple extra batteries in your bag anyway, right? So it's hardly a lifestyle change that I need to carry extra batteries. And so that turned out not to be a problem either. Now, you'll recall at the start of this video, I used the word added, not replaced. And that's because there are instances where I'm still going to use my D750s. And one of those instances is studio and portrait photography with off-camera flash. Now, when I do that kind of work, I use Pocket Wizard's little Flex TT5 radio controllers that sit on top of the camera and underneath the flashes, and they control the flashes when they're off camera. And the technology in the Z8 is so new that those Pocket Wizards will not work with it. So if that's the kind of photography you do, if you use Pocket Wizard Flex TT5s for off-camera flash photography, at least in my experience, they will not work with the Z8. So that is something to bear in mind. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, all of this is interesting and all, but what about image quality and how does the Z8 perform in the field? Well, the short answer is pretty good and pretty well, but I'm going to go into much more detail about those things in part 2.